Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars move past the windows. The year was 2387 in space. Travel had become as normal as driving a car back on Earth. His ship was called the New Horizon, and it was one of the newer human vessels in the Galactic Federation fleet. Jake had been captain for 5 years now, and he loved his job exploring the outer parts of known space. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. Lisa Parker sat at the weapons station checking the energy systems for the 10th time that day. She was the best weapons officer Jake had ever worked with, and she knew every part of their plasma rifles and energy cannons. Ben Rodriguez was down in the engine room making sure everything ran smoothly. He could fix anything that broke and had saved their lives more times than Jake could count. Amy White handled all communications from her station near the front of the bridge. She could speak 12 different alien languages and always knew what was happening in nearby systems. Humans had only joined the Galactic Federation 50 years ago, but they had learned fast. The Federation had been around for over 300 years and included dozens of different alien species. They all lived in peace because they had rules about warfare. Every civilized species used energy weapons that could be stopped by shield technology. Personal shields protected individuals, and larger shields protected ships and buildings. This made wars almost impossible because both sides would just shoot energy beams at each other until their power ran out. Jake remembered learning about the old days, when humans used kinetic weapons. Bullets and missiles and bombs that actually hit their targets with physical force. The Federation considered these weapons barbaric and primitive. Why throw chunks of metal when you could fire pure energy that moved at the speed of light? Most humans agreed and had given up their old weapons when they joined the galactic community. The communication system beeped and Amy turned to face Jake. A distress signal was coming from the science station on planet Kepler 442b. The message was weak and full of static, but they could make out enough words to understand that something terrible had happened. The station was under attack, and they needed help immediately. Jake ordered Ben to change course toward the planet. It would take them 6 hours to reach the system at maximum speed. During the trip, Jake tried to contact other Federation ships in the area, but nobody responded. The science station continued sending distress signals for 2 hours and then went completely silent. When they arrived at Kepler 442b, Jake could see that something was very wrong. The planet had 3 moons, and one of them showed signs of massive explosions. The science station had been built inside a mountain on the largest moon. From space, Jake could see huge holes blown in the rock where the station used to be. Debris floated in space around the moon, and some pieces were still glowing hot. Lisa ran scans of the area and found no energy weapon signatures. This confused her because energy weapons always left traces that could be detected for days after a battle. Whatever had attacked the station had used something different. The damage patterns looked strange, too. Instead of the clean cuts that energy weapons made, there were jagged holes and twisted metal scattered everywhere. Jake took a team down to the surface in a shuttle. Lisa and Amy came with him along with 2 security officers. They wore environmental suits because the moon had no atmosphere. The shuttle landed near what used to be the main entrance to the station. Now it was just a crater filled with broken rock and metal. They walked through the ruins looking for survivors or clues about what had happened. The station's shield generators had been completely destroyed, but not by energy weapons. Something had punched right through them, leaving holes the size of dinner plates. Lisa examined the damage and shook her head. She had never seen anything like it before. In the central laboratory, they found the bodies of the research team. The alien scientists had been killed by something that tore through their personal shields like they were not even there. Their equipment was smashed and their computers were destroyed. Whatever had attacked them had been thorough and brutal. Amy found a damaged recording device in the communications room. She managed to get it working, and they listened to the final minutes of the station. The scientists were screaming about unknown ships in orbit and weapons that their shields could not stop. One voice kept saying that the attackers were using primitive kinetic weapons, but that was impossible because such weapons had not been used in warfare for centuries. The recording ended with the sound of explosions and then silence. Jake looked around at the destruction and felt a chill run down his spine. Someone or something had just proven that the Federation's entire approach to warfare had a fatal weakness. Energy shields meant nothing against enemies who threw rocks. Instead of firing lasers, he contacted his ship and ordered them to send a message to Federation headquarters. This attack was different from anything they had seen before, and the authorities needed to know about it immediately. As they walked back to their shuttle, Jake wondered if the galaxy was about to change forever. Commander Zekthul stood on the command deck of his warship and watched his warriors prepare for the next attack. The ship was massive and built for war with thick armor plating and weapon systems that had been perfected over thousands of years. Unlike the sleek Federation vessels with their clean lines and energy weapons, the Vrak ships looked like floating fortresses, bristling with cannons and missile launchers. The Vrak had been watching the galaxy from beyond the rim for 3 centuries. They had seen the Federation grow and spread across thousands of star systems. They had studied their technology and their methods of warfare. What they discovered made them laugh. These so-called civilized species had made themselves weak by abandoning the weapons that actually worked. Ze Cathal remembered the first time his scouts had observed a Federation battle. 2 fleets had faced each other and fired energy beams back and forth for hours. The ships had shields that stopped every shot and nobody was hurt. Eventually, both sides ran out of power and went home. The Vrak commander had been amazed that anyone could call such a thing warfare. His people had taken a different path. When other species discovered energy weapons, the Vrak had improved their kinetic weapons instead. They built railguns that could fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds. They created mass drivers that could launch chunks of dense material across vast distances. They perfected what humans would recognize as advanced firearms that could punch through any armor. The attack on the science station had been a test. Zekthul wanted to see how Federation technology would handle real weapons. The results had exceeded his expectations. The station's shields had been completely useless against solid projectiles moving at high velocity. The scientists inside had died quickly and their fancy energy weapons had never fired a single shot. Now it was time for a larger test. His fleet of 12 warships approached a Federation patrol group near the border systems. The enemy had 4 ships, including a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Zekthul was not worried because he knew their weapons could not hurt him. The Federation ships detected the Vrak fleet and immediately raised their shields. The captain of the lead ship sent a communication demanding that the unknown vessels identify themselves and state their intentions. Zekthul ignored the message and ordered his gunners to target the enemy shields. The first volley came from the main cannon of Zekthul's flagship. It fired a projectile the size of a small car at 20% the speed of light. The Federation cruiser's shields flared as they tried to stop the incoming round, but kinetic energy could not be deflected like a laser beam. The projectile punched through the shield barrier and smashed into the ship's hull, creating a hole 10 meters wide. The Federation captain immediately sent a distress signal reporting that they were under attack by unknown weapons. He tried to return fire with his energy cannons, but the Vrak ships had no shields to target. Their armor was designed to absorb kinetic impacts, and the energy beams just heated up the metal without causing real damage. Within 10 minutes, all 4 Federation ships were either destroyed or crippled. The Vrak had not lost a single vessel. Zekthul watched the wreckage drift through space and felt satisfaction. The galaxy's defenders were even weaker than he had hoped. His communication officer reported that Federation reinforcements were coming. A fleet of 20 ships was moving toward their position at maximum speed. Zekthul ordered his vessels to wait and let them come. He wanted to send a message that would reach every corner of Federation space. The reinforcement fleet arrived too. Hours later, led by Admiral Helen Cross aboard the battleship Destiny. She had commanded Federation forces for 15 years and had never seen anything like the wreckage floating around her. The destroyed ships showed impact damage instead of energy burns. Someone was using kinetic weapons in an age when such things were considered impossible. Admiral Cross tried to negotiate with the unknown attackers. She broadcast messages in every known language offering to discuss whatever grievances they might have. The response came in perfect Federation standard, and the voice was cold and full of contempt. Zekthul introduced himself as the commander of the Vrak invasion force. He explained that his people had watched the Federation grow soft and weak behind their energy shields. The time had come to show them what real warfare looked like. There would be no negotiations and no mercy for those who had forgotten how to fight. The battle that followed was a massacre. The Federation ships fired everything they had at the Vrak fleet, but their energy weapons were useless against solid armor. The Vrak responded with railgun fire and missile barrages that tore through Federation shields like they were made of paper. Ship after ship exploded or broke apart under the kinetic assault. Admiral Cross watched her fleet die around her and realized that everything she knew about warfare was wrong. Her shields meant nothing and her weapons could not penetrate enemy armor. She sent one final message to Federation headquarters before her ship was destroyed by a mass driver round that split it in half. The message reached the capital world of Terra, prime 12 hours later. The Federation Council emergency session lasted all night as military leaders tried to understand what had happened. Energy shields were supposed to be the perfect defense, and energy weapons were the most advanced technology in the galaxy. How could primitive kinetic weapons be so effective? Reports came in from other systems as the Vrak invasion spread. Planet after planet fell to the unknown attackers. Their weapons could not be stopped, and their armor could not be penetrated. The Federation's most advanced warships were helpless against enemies who fought like barbarians from the ancient past. In desperation, the Council reached out to every member species, asking for ideas or technologies that might help. Most had nothing to offer because they had all abandoned kinetic weapons centuries ago. Only the humans responded with something unexpected. They still remembered how to build and use the primitive weapons that were destroying Federation fleets across the galaxy. Admiral Helen Cross sat in the emergency council chamber, surrounded by military leaders from every major species in the Federation. The holographic displays showed red zones spreading across the galaxy as Vrak forces conquered system after system. In just 2 weeks, they had taken 12 colonies and destroyed 43 Federation warships without losing a single vessel of their own. The Altarian general spoke first with his translator device, converting his clicks and whistles into standard language. His people had tried everything they could think of, including concentrated energy bursts and plasma torpedoes. Nothing worked against Vrak armor, and their shields were useless against kinetic projectiles. The Centaurian admiral agreed and added that her forces had attempted ramming attacks, but the enemy ships were too heavily armored. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the back of the room listening to the desperation in their voices. He had been called to the capital after his report about the destroyed science station. Every species was searching their databases for weapons that might work against an enemy who used solid projectiles instead of energy beams. The Andromedan colonel suggested using gravity weapons to crush the Vrak ships, but those took too long to charge and could be easily avoided. The Ciarian commander mentioned experimental particle accelerators, but they were still in development and would take years to mass produce. Every idea they discussed required technology that either did not exist or could not be built quickly enough. Jake raised his hand and asked for permission to speak. Admiral Cross recognized him, and the room fell silent. He walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled leaders. These were some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were stumped by weapons that humans had been using for centuries. He explained that humans still maintained knowledge of kinetic weapons from their violent past. Unlike other species, humanity had not completely abandoned the technology when they joined the Federation. Some human colonies still used firearms for hunting dangerous animals and sport shooting. The military kept examples in museums, and there were even hobbyists who collected and maintained working weapons from the pre-space era. The alien leaders stared at him in confusion. Admiral Cross asked him to elaborate, and Jake gestured for Lisa Parker to join him. She had been waiting outside the chamber with a case containing items from the New Horizons historical collection. Lisa opened the case and pulled out a simple handgun that was over 400 years old. The weapon looked primitive compared to the sleek energy pistols that Federation officers carried. It was made of metal and polymer with moving parts that clicked when Lisa checked the action. She explained that it fired small metal projectiles using chemical explosives. The bullets were designed to penetrate armor and tissue through kinetic energy rather than heat or radiation. The Altarian general asked how such a primitive device could be effective against modern armor. Lisa activated her personal energy shield and aimed the pistol at a target pad on the wall. The shield barrier flickered between her and the target, designed to stop any energy weapon. She pulled the trigger and the gunshot echoed through the chamber. The bullet passed through the energy shield without slowing down and struck the target pad with enough force to crack the reinforced material. The alien leaders jumped at the sound and stared at the smoking hole in the wall. Lisa explained that energy shields could not stop solid matter and that kinetic weapons had been specifically designed to defeat armor. Ben Rodriguez stepped forward with technical specifications for various kinetic weapon systems. He had spent the trip to the capital downloading information from human databases and military archives. The data included everything from simple rifles to advanced railgun designs that could be mounted on starships. Most importantly, it showed that human industrial capacity could be converted to mass-produce these weapons in a matter of weeks. Admiral Cross asked Jake how many kinetic weapons humans could manufacture and how quickly they could be distributed to Federation forces. Jake contacted Earth's Industrial Council and received an answer within minutes. Human factories could produce millions of small arms and thousands of ship-mounted kinetic weapons within a month. The designs were simple and the materials were common throughout. Federation space. The Centaurian admiral expressed doubt about using such primitive technology against an advanced enemy. Jake reminded her that the Vrak were using the same primitive technology to destroy Federation fleets. Sometimes the old ways worked better than the new ones, especially when the enemy was not prepared for them. The council voted unanimously to authorize human leadership of the anti-Vrak campaign. Jake was promoted to admiral and given command of a joint task force that would test kinetic weapons against the invasion fleet. Earth's factories began retooling immediately, and every human colony started producing ammunition and weapon components. The most difficult part would be training alien species to use kinetic weapons. Energy weapons were point and shoot with unlimited ammunition and no recoil. Kinetic weapons required understanding of ballistics, ammunition management, and maintenance procedures that most aliens had never encountered. The Federation military academies began crash courses in primitive warfare taught by human instructors. Colonel Steve Johnson arrived from Earth with a team of retired Marines who remembered pre-energy weapon tactics. They had volunteered to help train Federation forces in the use of rifles, machine guns, and artillery. The first classes were disasters as alien soldiers struggled with concepts like gravity drop and wind compensation that energy weapons ignored. Amy White worked with communication specialists to develop new tactical procedures for kinetic warfare. Federation forces were used to long-range energy duels where shields provided protection and battles could last for hours. Kinetic weapons worked best at shorter ranges where accuracy was easier and the psychological impact was greater. Reports from the front lines showed that Vrak forces were continuing their advance but at a slower pace. They had encountered some resistance from human colonies that still maintained kinetic weapons for local defense. The results were encouraging because colonists with hunting rifles had managed to kill Vrak soldiers whose armor was designed to stop energy weapons. The first shipment of human-made weapons arrived at the front lines 3 weeks after the emergency council meeting. Federation soldiers received basic training in rifle operation and marksmanship. The weapons felt strange in their hands and the chemical propellant smell was unfamiliar. Many aliens complained that the guns were too loud and produced too much Smoke. Jake watched the training exercises from the command center and felt both hope and worry. The kinetic weapons would work against Vrak forces, but only if Federation soldiers could learn to use them effectively. The upcoming battle would determine whether humanity's violent past could save the galaxy's peaceful future. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Starbase Alpha and watched hundreds of ships being converted for kinetic warfare. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to mount railguns and missile launchers on vessels that had only carried energy weapons for decades. The Federation's industrial capacity had been turned toward producing weapons that most civilizations had abandoned centuries ago. The transformation was happening across known space as every major shipyard retooled their production lines. Earth's factories ran 24 hours a day manufacturing rifles, ammunition, and artillery pieces. Human colonies that had maintained small arms for hunting and sport found themselves supplying weapons to alien military forces who had never seen a bullet before. Colonel Steve Johnson supervised the training of alien soldiers at bases throughout Federation territory. The Marines he had brought from Earth were teaching basic marksmanship to species who had only used energy weapons. The Altarians struggled with the weight of assault rifles, while the Centaurians had trouble with weapons designed for human hands. Every species needed custom modifications and specialized training programs. The psychological aspect was just as challenging as the physical requirements. Energy weapons were clean and precise with minimal noise and no visible projectile. Kinetic weapons were loud, messy, and violent in ways that many civilized species found disturbing. The smell of gunpowder and the sight of brass casings scattered on the ground reminded them of their own violent past that they had tried to forget. Ben Rodriguez led teams of engineers who were installing kinetic weapon systems on Federation starships. The modifications required major structural changes because kinetic weapons needed ammunition storage and loading mechanisms. Energy weapons drew power directly from the ship's reactor, but bullets and missiles had to be manufactured, stored, and loaded manually. The first converted warship was the cruiser Harmony, which received a battery of electromagnetic railguns capable of firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The installation took 3 weeks and required removing 2 energy weapon turrets to make room for the ammunition handling systems. When the weapons were tested, the results exceeded all expectations. Lisa Parker worked with weapons experts from multiple species to develop new tactical doctrines for kinetic warfare. Federation military strategy was based on long-range energy duels where shields provided mutual protection. Kinetic weapons worked best at shorter ranges where accuracy was easier and the impact was more devastating. This meant completely rewriting the rules of engagement that had governed warfare for centuries. The most important change was the concept of combined arms, where different weapon types worked together. Energy weapons could disable enemy shields and sensors while kinetic weapons delivered the killing blow. Artillery could suppress enemy positions while infantry advanced with rifles and machine guns. These tactics had been standard during humanity's wars but were revolutionary for other species. Amy White coordinated with intelligence services to gather information about Vrak military capabilities and weaknesses. The enemy had been using kinetic weapons for thousands of years, and their tactics were highly developed. However, they had never faced opponents who could match their weapons technology. The Vrak had grown overconfident, fighting enemies who could only use energy weapons. Reports from captured Vrak equipment showed that their personal armor was excellent against kinetic impacts but had no protection against energy weapons. Their ship armor was designed to absorb physical projectiles but could be weakened by sustained energy bombardment. This suggested that combined human-alien tactics might be effective if properly coordinated. The training exercises revealed both promising developments and serious problems. Human instructors were amazed at how quickly some alien species adapted to kinetic weapons. The Andromedans had excellent hand-eye coordination and became skilled marksmen within days. The Saurians had natural talent for artillery and could calculate firing solutions faster than human computers. Other species struggled with basic concepts like ammunition conservation and weapon maintenance. The Altarians treated rifles like energy weapons and expected them to work indefinitely without cleaning or repair. Several training accidents occurred when alien soldiers forgot about recoil and injured themselves or nearby personnel. Jake received regular reports about Vrak fleet movements and noticed that the enemy advance had slowed significantly. Intelligence suggested that the Vrak were encountering unexpected resistance from human colonies and were taking time to study the new weapons being used against them. This gave the Federation more time to prepare, but also meant the enemy was learning about kinetic weapons capabilities. The first major test came when a Vrak scouting force attacked a mining station in the Kepler system. The station had been evacuated except for a volunteer defense force equipped with human weapons. The defenders included both humans and aliens who had completed the accelerated training program. The battle would show whether Federation forces could actually fight using kinetic weapons. The Vrak attack followed their standard pattern with heavy ships, using mass drivers to destroy the station's shields and energy weapons. However, the defenders did not rely on shields for protection. Instead, they used the mining tunnels as cover and waited for the enemy landing craft to approach within rifle range. When Vrak soldiers attempted to secure the station, they encountered resistance unlike anything they had faced before. Federation defenders fired from concealed positions using tactics that had not been seen in galactic warfare for centuries. The Vrak personal armor stopped some bullets, but their shields were useless and many soldiers were killed by weapons they did not understand. The station defenders held out for 6 hours before being overwhelmed, but they had proven that kinetic weapons could kill Vrak soldiers. More importantly, they had captured several enemy weapons and pieces of equipment that could be studied by Federation scientists. The sacrifice of the mining station provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Jake analyzed the battle reports and felt cautiously optimistic about Federation chances. The kinetic weapons worked as advertised and properly trained personnel could use them effectively. However, the Vrak still had superior numbers and experience with this type of warfare. The upcoming major battle would determine whether the galaxy's civilized species could learn to fight like barbarians quickly enough to survive. Production reports from across Federation space showed that millions of kinetic weapons had been manufactured and distributed. Every major fleet had been partially converted to carry railguns and missile systems. Alien soldiers were learning to clean rifles and calculate ballistic trajectories. The Federation was transforming itself from a peaceful civilization into something that could match the Vrak in brutal efficiency. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the largest Vrak fleet ever assembled approach Proxima Station. The enemy force included over 60 warships led by Commander Zekthal himself aboard a massive dreadnought that could destroy entire cities. Intelligence reports suggested this was the main Vrak invasion fleet, and defeating it would cripple their ability to continue the war. Proxima Station was the Federation's largest military installation with shipyards, weapons factories, and training facilities spread across 3 asteroid bases. Over 2 million personnel worked at the station, including many alien species who had never experienced warfare. If Proxima fell, the Vrak would have a staging area deep inside Federation territory, and the war would be lost. Jake commanded a mixed fleet of 47 ships from 12 different species. Every vessel had been modified to carry kinetic weapons alongside their original energy systems. Human advisors were stationed on each ship to help with tactics and weapon operation. The fleet represented the Federation's last hope of stopping the Vrak advance before it reached the core worlds. Lisa Parker monitored the weapon systems from her station on the bridge. The flagship carried both energy cannons and electromagnetic railguns capable of firing projectiles at 12% light speed. The ammunition magazines held enough rounds for an extended battle, but every shot had to count because they could not be replenished during combat. Energy weapons had unlimited ammunition as long as the reactors functioned, but kinetic weapons were finite. Ben Rodriguez reported that all systems were operating within normal parameters. The modifications to accommodate kinetic weapons had required extensive changes to power distribution and structural reinforcement. Some ships had lost speed and maneuverability to make room for ammunition storage and loading mechanisms. The fleet was less elegant than traditional Federation forces, but potentially more deadly. Amy White coordinated communications between the mixed species fleet. Each race had different tactical doctrines and command structures that had to be integrated into a unified battle plan. The humans provided expertise in kinetic warfare, while other species contributed their knowledge of energy weapons and shield technology. The combination was untested but theoretically superior to pure energy or kinetic systems. Commander Zekthul approached the station with confidence based on his previous victories. Federation fleets had been helpless against Vrak kinetic weapons, and their energy shields provided no protection. The commander expected another easy victory that would demonstrate Vrak superiority over the galaxy's civilized species. His warriors were eager to prove themselves in battle against enemies who had forgotten how to fight. The Vrak fleet opened fire at maximum range with mass drivers and heavy railguns. The projectiles crossed the distance between the fleets in minutes and struck Federation ships that tried to maneuver out of the way. Several vessels were destroyed immediately, but others survived hits that should have been fatal. The Federation had learned from previous battles and reinforced their hulls against kinetic impacts. Jake ordered his fleet to return fire with both energy and kinetic weapons. The energy cannons targeted Vrak shields and sensors, while the railguns aimed for hull breaches and weapon systems. The combined bombardment confused the enemy, who were not used to facing multiple weapon types simultaneously. Some Vrak ships maneuvered to avoid energy weapons and exposed themselves to kinetic fire. The battle developed into a complex dance as both fleets maneuvered for advantage. The Vrak had superior firepower and armor, but the Federation ships were faster and more agile. Human tactical doctrine emphasized mobility and concentration of force, while Vrak strategy relied on overwhelming firepower and heavy armor. The two approaches created opportunities for both sides. Lisa coordinated the targeting systems to maximize the effectiveness of combined weapons fire. Energy weapons could disable Vrak shields and sensors, making them vulnerable to kinetic strikes. Kinetic weapons could penetrate armor and create hull breaches that energy weapons could exploit. The synergy between old and new technology proved more effective than either system used alone. The turning point came when Jake ordered a coordinated attack on Zekthul's flagship. 6 Federation ships concentrated their fire on the massive dreadnought, while human marines prepared for boarding action. The Vrak vessel's armor absorbed most kinetic impacts but sustained energy bombardment weakened the hull and disabled several weapon systems. Ben launched boarding pods filled with human and alien marines armed with assault rifles and shotguns. The pods were designed to punch through damaged hull sections and deliver troops directly into enemy ships. This was an ancient tactic that had not been used in galactic warfare for centuries, but proved highly effective against opponents who were not prepared for it. The boarding action caught the Vrak completely off guard. Their internal defenses were designed to stop energy weapons, and their personal armor was optimized for kinetic impacts from their own weapons. The Federation Marines used tactics and weapons that had not been seen in space combat for hundreds of years. Shotgun blasts at close range penetrated Vrak armor, while rifle fire disabled their shields. Commander Zekthul found himself facing Admiral Morrison in personal combat aboard his own command deck. The Vrak commander wore advanced armor and carried energy weapons that should have made him invulnerable to primitive attacks. However, Morrison's sidearm was a simple .45 caliber pistol that fired bullets designed to penetrate body armor. At close range, the confrontation was brief and decisive. Zekthul's energy shields could not stop solid projectiles, and his armor was not designed to handle impacts from chemical-propellant weapons. Morrison's pistol punched through the advanced materials like they were paper, and the Vrak commander fell with a look of disbelief on his face. The sight of their leader defeated by a primitive weapon broke the morale of the remaining Vrak forces. With their flagship captured and their commander dead, the Vrak fleet began to retreat. Several ships surrendered rather than face boarding, actions they could not repel. Others fled toward the galactic rim, leaving behind damaged vessels and valuable equipment. The Federation had won its first major victory against the invasion force. The battle cost both sides heavily, but the strategic situation had changed dramatically. The Vrak had lost their main fleet and their most experienced commander. More importantly, they had learned that their technological advantages were not absolute. The Federation had weapons that could hurt them and tactics they could not counter. The war was far from over, but the galaxy's civilized species had proven they could learn to fight like barbarians when survival was at stake. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the captured Vrak dreadnought 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Station. The massive ship had been converted into a joint Federation Vrak research facility where scientists from both sides studied each other's weapons technology. The war had officially ended 3 months ago with a ceasefire that surprised everyone, including the negotiators. The turning point had come when surviving Vrak commanders realized their invasion was doomed. Federation forces had learned to use kinetic weapons effectively and were producing them faster than the Vrak could destroy them. More importantly, the galaxy's civilized species had rediscovered their capacity for violence and were applying it with scientific precision. The Vrak found themselves facing enemies who combined advanced technology with primitive brutality. Commander Zekthul had survived his wounds and spent his recovery time studying human military history. What he discovered changed his entire perspective on warfare and civilization. Humans had fought continuous wars for thousands of years and had developed tactics and weapons that the Vrak had never imagined. Their knowledge of violence was deeper and more sophisticated than any species the Vrak had encountered. The ceasefire negotiations had been conducted by Admiral Morrison and Commander Zekthul aboard the neutral station at Alpha Centauri. Both leaders had gained respect for each other during their brief personal combat and found they shared similar views about the nature of warfare. The discussions lasted 2 weeks and resulted in an agreement that shocked both governments. The Vrak would cease their invasion and return captured territory in exchange for full membership in the Galactic Federation. More importantly, they would share their kinetic weapons technology while the Federation shared their energy weapons and shield systems. The combination of both technologies would create military capabilities that neither side could achieve alone. Lisa Parker had been promoted to colonel and now commanded the Federation's new kinetic weapons division. Her job was to integrate bullet and missile technology into standard military doctrine while training officers from every species in their use. The work was challenging because each race had different physical capabilities and cultural attitudes toward violence. The Altarians had trouble with the weight and recoil of most kinetic weapons, but excelled at using precision rifles for long-range shooting. The Centaurians adapted quickly to heavy machine guns and artillery that matched their strength and aggressive nature. The Andromedans became skilled at maintaining complex weapon systems that required constant cleaning and adjustment. Ben Rodriguez led the engineering teams that were designing new hybrid weapons combining energy and kinetic technologies. The latest prototypes used energy fields to accelerate metal projectiles to incredible velocities, while magnetic systems guided them to their targets. The weapons were more complex than traditional guns, but offered capabilities that neither technology could provide alone. Training academies throughout Federation space had added courses in primitive warfare taught by human instructors and Vrak veterans. Young officers learned to calculate ballistic trajectories and plan ammunition resupply alongside traditional energy weapon tactics. The curriculum included lessons on psychological warfare, close combat, and the ethical implications of weapons that could not be easily defended against. Amy White worked with Diplomatic Corps personnel to establish new rules of engagement for kinetic warfare. The old conventions assumed that energy shields would protect civilian populations and that battles would have limited casualties. Kinetic weapons changed everything because they could penetrate any defense and cause massive destruction if used improperly. The first joint Federation Vrak military exercises had been conducted near the Vega system with mixed results. Both sides were learning to coordinate their different approaches to combat while respecting each other's strengths. Human advisors helped bridge the gap between civilized and warrior mentalities by explaining how violence could be controlled and directed toward specific military objectives. Jake received reports from across the galaxy showing how the integration was progressing. Some species adapted quickly to kinetic weapons, while others struggled with concepts that seemed barbaric and uncivilized. The key was finding the right balance between aggressive capability and peaceful intention. Weapons were tools that reflected the values of those who used them. The most significant development was the emergence of new military doctrines that combined the best aspects of both technologies. Energy weapons remained superior for space combat and siege warfare, while kinetic weapons excelled at close-quarters battle and armor penetration. Ships carried both systems, and commanders learned to switch between them based on tactical requirements. Former enemies worked together to establish supply chains for ammunition and spare parts that kinetic weapons required. The Vrak had thousands of years of experience manufacturing bullets and maintaining firearms, while Federation species contributed advanced materials and precision manufacturing techniques. The collaboration produced weapons that were more reliable and effective than either side had created alone. Commander Zekthul had been appointed as special advisor to the Federation Defense Council, where his experience with kinetic warfare helped shape new military policies. He worked closely with human officers who understood both civilized restraint and warrior aggression. The partnership between former enemies became a model for cooperation throughout the galaxy. The transformation was not without problems and resistance. Many Federation citizens were uncomfortable with the return of primitive weapons and the warrior culture they represented. Peace activists argued that kinetic weapons would lead to more violence and undermine the civilized society they had built over centuries. The debate continued in legislative bodies across known space. Jake stood on the observation deck of Proxima Station and watched ships from dozens of species practicing joint maneuvers with mixed weapon systems. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the old ways were not obsolete, but were waiting for the right circumstances to prove their value again. Humanity's violent heritage had become their gift to galactic civilization. Young alien cadets learned to field-strip assault rifles while their instructors explained the philosophy behind weapons that could not be defended against. The lessons went beyond technical specifications to include discussions of responsibility, restraint, and the terrible beauty of violence properly applied. The galaxy was becoming more dangerous, but also more honest about the reality of conflict in an imperfect universe.